The man who vanished into the storm. The mystery of D.B. Cooper. Imagine sitting on an ordinary flight home for Thanksgiving. You look out the window. The engines hum quietly. People read newspapers. Some are sleeping. A businessman nearby calmly drinks his whiskey. Nothing seems unusual. Then, without shouting, without firing a single shot, that quiet businessman tells a flight attendant that he has a bomb. A few hours later, he walks away with $200,000, opens the back stairs of a flying airplane, and disappears into a violent storm. No body, no parachute, no answers. More than 50 years later, the mystery still has no ending. Who was D.B. Cooper? Did he survive one of the most dangerous jumps in history, or did the forest bury his secret forever? This is the true story of the only unsolved airplane hijacking in American history. The date was November 24th, 1971. It was the day before Thanksgiving in the United States. Airports were crowded with families traveling home. Businessmen hurried through terminals. Children waited excitedly for the holidays. Everything looked completely normal. But the world of air travel was very different from today. There were no airport security checkpoints, no X-ray machines, no metal detectors. Passengers could walk into the airport, buy a ticket with cash, and board a plane within minutes. No one searched their bags. No one checked their identity carefully. People trusted each other. That trust was about to be tested. At Portland International Airport, a man quietly entered the terminal. He did not rush. He did not look nervous. Witnesses later described him as being around 40 to 50 years old, about 6 feet tall, average build, dark brown hair, brown eyes, clean shaven. He wore a black business suit with a white dress shirt, a narrow black tie held together with a small pearl tie clip, a dark raincoat, polished black shoes, dark sunglasses covered his eyes. He looked exactly like thousands of businessmen traveling that day. Nothing about him attracted attention. That may have been his greatest disguise. He walked to the airline counter. Without hesitation, he paid $20 in cash for a one-way ticket from Portland to Seattle. The ticket was issued under the name Dan Cooper. Years later, newspapers accidentally reported his name as D.B. Cooper, after confusing him with another person investigators had briefly considered. The mistake spread across the country. The false name became legendary. Today, almost nobody remembers the name written on the ticket. The entire world simply knows him as D.B. Cooper. His flight was Northwest Orient Flight 305. The aircraft was a Boeing 727. At first glance, it looked like any other passenger airplane. But it had one special feature that almost no one thought about: a staircase beneath the tail of the aircraft. Unlike modern passenger planes, the rear stairs could be lowered while the plane was still flying. Years later, aviation experts would realize that this small design detail made Cooper's incredible escape possible. Cooper boarded calmly. He chose seat 18C near the back of the airplane. He placed his black briefcase beside him. Then he ordered a bourbon and soda. He lit a cigarette. Smoking was completely legal on airplanes in 1971. Nothing seemed unusual. Passengers chatted quietly. Some looked through magazines. Others stared out the windows as rain clouds gathered outside. The engines started. Flight 305 rolled onto the runway. Within minutes, it lifted into the gray afternoon sky. About 8 minutes after takeoff, a young flight attendant named Florence Schaffner walked down the aisle. As she passed Cooper, he quietly handed her a folded piece of paper. Without looking at it, she smiled politely. She thought it was another passenger trying to flirt with her. That happened often. She slipped the note into her pocket and continued working. Cooper leaned slightly toward her. His voice remained calm, almost friendly. He quietly said, "Miss, you better read that note." His expression never changed. No anger, no fear, no panic, only confidence. Florence stopped walking. She unfolded the note. The message was short, clear, direct. It said he had a bomb. He wanted her to sit beside him. Her heartbeat raced. She slowly sat down next to him. Still speaking softly, Cooper opened his briefcase just enough for her to see inside. She later told investigators that she saw several red cylinders, wires, a battery. Everything looked exactly like a real explosive device. To this day, nobody knows if it actually was a bomb. The briefcase disappeared with Cooper, but for Florence, there was no reason to doubt what she had just seen. The atmosphere inside the cabin had completely changed, not for the passengers. They continued reading newspapers, talking quietly, looking out the windows. They had no idea that only a few feet away, history was changing. One calm man, without raising his voice, without firing a weapon, had just taken control of an entire passenger airplane, and this was only the beginning. Florence Schaffner forced herself to stay calm. Every instinct told her to panic, but she knew that if the passengers became frightened, everything could quickly turn into chaos. Cooper understood that too. He never shouted. He never threatened anyone in the cabin. He spoke politely, almost like a businessman discussing an important meeting. That calm behavior made him even more frightening. Cooper handed Florence another message. This time, it contained his demands. He wanted exactly $200,000 in cash. He also wanted 4 parachutes, 2 main parachutes, 2 reserve parachutes, and he wanted a fuel truck waiting when the plane landed in Seattle. If his demands were met, everyone on board would be released safely. If not, he warned that he would use the bomb. The captain immediately contacted air traffic control. Within minutes, the message reached the FBI and government officials. A hijacking was now in progress. The news spread quietly through emergency channels. Inside the airplane, almost nothing had changed. Passengers laughed. Some ordered drinks. Others planned what they would do after landing. None of them knew that the plane was now surrounded by one of the largest law enforcement operations in the country. Officials faced an impossible decision. Should they refuse, or should they give Cooper everything he wanted? There was one problem. There were dozens of innocent people on board. No one wanted to risk their lives. The decision was made. The ransom would be paid. While officials rushed to collect the money, Cooper remained surprisingly relaxed. He ordered another bourbon and soda. He even paid for his drink. Witnesses later remembered how polite he was. He thanked the flight attendants. He never insulted anyone. He never acted out of control. His behavior confused investigators for decades. Most hijackers were emotional. Some were angry. Others were desperate. But Cooper showed almost no emotion at all. It was as if he had planned every minute of this day long before boarding the airplane. Meanwhile, the Boeing 727 circled above the Seattle area. It could not land yet. The FBI needed time. Banks worked quickly to gather the money. Employees counted thousands of $20 bills. Every single bill was photographed. Investigators carefully recorded each serial number. If the money ever appeared again, they hoped it would lead them straight to Cooper. No one realized that those serial numbers would become one of the greatest mysteries of the entire case. As the plane continued circling, Cooper asked to speak with the cockpit crew through the flight attendants. His instructions were precise. He wanted the passengers to remain calm. No sudden movements, no tricks, no heroes. The captain agreed. Keeping everyone alive had become the only priority. Outside, the sun slowly disappeared. Darkness began covering Seattle. The tension grew with every passing minute. Finally, permission to land was given. Flight 305 touched down at Seattle-Tacoma Airport. Police cars stayed far away. The airport looked strangely quiet. Cooper had ordered authorities to keep their distance. He watched carefully through the window. He trusted no one. A fuel truck approached slowly. Another vehicle carried the ransom money and the parachutes. Everything happened exactly as Cooper had demanded. A representative carefully delivered the money. The bag contained $200,000 in cash. Next came the parachutes, 4 of them, just as requested. Cooper quickly checked everything. He appeared satisfied. For the first time since boarding the plane, his plan was becoming real. Then came the moment every passenger would remember forever. Cooper kept his promise. He ordered the flight attendants to release every passenger, one by one. People left the airplane. Many still had no idea how close they had come to disaster. Some thought there had simply been a mechanical problem. Others noticed armed police in the distance but did not understand why. Only after entering the airport did they learn the truth. They had just survived an airplane hijacking. The cabin suddenly became almost empty. Only a handful of people remained: the captain, the first officer, the flight engineer, and one flight attendant, Tina Mucklow. Cooper chose her to stay. He needed someone to communicate with the cockpit. The danger was far from over. In many ways, it was only beginning. Now, Cooper gave his final instructions. He wanted the aircraft to fly toward Mexico City. He ordered the pilots to fly low, around 10,000 feet, at a slow speed, with the landing gear partially lowered. He also wanted the wing flaps set at a specific angle. These were unusual requests, not something an ordinary passenger would know. The pilots exchanged worried glances. Who was this man? A former soldier? A skydiver? An aviation expert? Or someone who had spent years preparing for this exact night? They had no answers. Neither does anyone today. Shortly after 7:40 that evening, Flight 305 took off from Seattle once again. This time, there were no ordinary passengers on board. Only the flight crew, Tina Mucklow, and the mysterious man who now carried $200,000 in cash. Outside, the weather had turned dangerous. Heavy rain covered the Pacific Northwest. Strong winds shook the aircraft. Below them stretched endless forests, rivers, and mountains. If someone jumped into that darkness, finding them would be almost impossible. Not long after takeoff, Cooper called Tina to the back of the aircraft. His voice was still calm. He asked her to show him how to operate the rear staircase. She explained the controls. He listened carefully. Then he told her to return to the cockpit. She hesitated. She asked if there was anything else he needed. He simply shook his head. Then he said something she would never forget. No, it was the last confirmed word anyone ever heard from D.B. Cooper. Tina walked forward. She closed the cockpit door behind her. From that moment on, no one ever saw Cooper's face again. A warning light appeared inside the cockpit. It showed that the rear staircase had been lowered. The pilots looked at one another. Nobody said a word. They knew exactly what it meant. Later, investigators believe this happened at approximately 8:13 p.m. Think about what that meant. A man wearing a business suit, carrying a heavy bag filled with cash, stepped out of the back of a passenger airplane at night, in freezing temperatures, during heavy rain, over thick forests, with winds enough to push a person far off course. Most skydivers would never attempt such a jump, yet Cooper did. Or at least, investigators believe he did. No one actually saw him leave the aircraft. The plane continued flying south. The crew followed their instructions. Eventually, they safely in Reno, Nevada. The moment the aircraft stopped, FBI agents rushed aboard, weapons ready. They searched every corner, seat, every storage compartment. The cabin was empty. Cooper was gone. The only he had left behind were a few small clues: a black clip-on tie, a pearl tie clip, a handful of cigarette butts. Years later, the butts would before modern DNA testing could be performed. One of the biggest pieces of evidence was lost forever. Within hours, the largest in FBI history at that time had begun. Hundreds of agents spread across Washington state. Military helicopters searched from the air. Police officers entered thick forests. Boats searched nearby rivers. Search teams walked through mud, rain, and freezing temperatures. They hoped to find a parachute, a body, the money, anything. But they found nothing. It was as if the man had vanished into the storm. Investigators tried to determine where Cooper had landed, but that was harder than it sounded. The exact jump point was unknown. The weather had been terrible. Strong winds could have carried him miles away. Even the pilots could not say exactly when he had jumped. Every new calculation produced a different search area. The wilderness of the Pacific Northwest stretched for hundreds of miles. Searching all of it was impossible. Then investigators faced another question. Had Cooper even survived? Some experts believed the jump was almost suicidal, but other experts strongly disagreed. They pointed out that Cooper seemed surprisingly knowledgeable. He knew details about the Boeing 727 that very few people knew. He specifically requested 4 parachutes. Some investigators believed this was a clever trick. He also chose an aircraft capable of lowering its rear staircase during flight. That suggested planning, not luck. The more investigators learned, the more mysterious he became. Was he incredibly lucky? Or had he spent months, perhaps years, preparing for a single jump that would make him a legend? No one could answer. The days turned into weeks. The weeks became months. Still, there was no sign of D.B. Cooper, no body, no parachute, no bag of money, nothing. For the FBI, the case became an obsession. Agents interviewed hundreds of witnesses. Then hundreds became thousands. Anyone who looked similar to Cooper was investigated. Former soldiers, skydivers, pilots, criminals, even ordinary businessmen. Over the years, the FBI examined more than 1,000 serious suspects. Some looked almost identical to the witness sketches. Others had military training. Some had experience with explosives or parachutes, but every lead eventually fell apart. There was never enough evidence to prove who Cooper really was. One question divided investigators from the beginning. Did Cooper survive? Some believed the answer was no. The conditions that night were terrible. Heavy rain, powerful winds, freezing temperatures, a heavy bag full of cash tied to his body. He wore a business suit instead of proper skydiving equipment. Many experienced parachutists believed no one could have survived such a jump. If Cooper died in the forest, wild animals, weather, and time could have hidden every trace of him forever. Others believed the opposite. They argued that Cooper remained calm from beginning to end. He knew exactly which airplane to choose. He knew how the rear staircase worked. He requested 4 parachutes instead of 1. Some investigators believed this was a clever trick. If the authorities feared he might force someone to jump with him, they would never risk giving him a fake parachute. Every detail suggested planning, not panic. If he had prepared carefully enough, perhaps he really did escape. Then, nearly 9 years later, the mystery took an unexpected turn. In February 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was on a family camping trip along the banks of the Columbia River. While playing in the sand, he noticed something strange. Small bundles of old $20 bills. The money was badly damaged. The rubber bands had almost fallen apart. His family contacted the authorities. When investigators examined the bills, they made an incredible discovery. The serial numbers matched the ransom money given to Cooper in 1971. It was the first, and remains the only, confirmed ransom money ever recovered. The total was $5,800. But it raised even more questions than it answered. How did the money get there? Did Cooper bury it? Did the river carry it there? Or had someone else moved it years later? No one knows. As technology improved, investigators returned to the evidence. One item became especially important: the black clip-on tie Cooper had left on the airplane. For years, it seemed ordinary. Then scientists examined it using modern equipment. They discovered tiny particles trapped in the fabric. Some of the particles were metals, such as titanium and other materials commonly used in advanced manufacturing during the 1960s and early 1970s. This led some researchers to suggest that Cooper may have worked in the aerospace or metal industry. But this was only a theory. The particles could not identify one specific person. They simply offered another possible clue. Over the decades, many suspects captured public attention. Some families claimed that a relative had secretly confessed before dying. Others pointed to former military paratroopers. Several books insisted they had solved the mystery. Television documentaries introduced new names. Internet investigators built detailed timelines. Again and again, each theory sounded convincing, and again, none could be proven. No suspect has ever been confirmed by the FBI. In 2016, after 45 years of investigation, the FBI made a surprising announcement. The agency officially closed its active investigation into the D.B. Cooper case. This did not mean the mystery was solved. It simply meant there were no more realistic leads to follow. If new evidence ever appears, investigators could reopen the case. But until the identity of Cooper remains unknown. Today, more than half a century has passed. Some believe Cooper died the night he jumped. Others believe he landed safely, hid the money, and lived the rest of his life under another name, the truth may still be waiting somewhere in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. Or perhaps it disappeared forever with the man himself. There is one thing we know for certain. On November 24th, 1971, an ordinary-looking businessman boarded a plane carrying only a briefcase. A few hours later, he stepped into a violent storm with $200,000. No camera captured his final moments. No witness saw him land. No one ever proved who he was. More than 50 years later, the world is still asking the same question. Who was D.B. Cooper? And perhaps the most chilling question of all, did he get away with the perfect crime end?